Do exactly this right now. Take both of your thumbs and place them directly behind your ears, at the exact point where the base of your skull meets your neck. Now press inward and upward. Dig your thumbs into the thick, horizontal band of tissue running across the back of your head. Press hard enough that it becomes slightly uncomfortable. Hold that pressure. Do not release it. Listen to me very carefully. Pay absolute, hyper-focused attention to what that tissue feels like under your thumbs. It does not feel like soft, pliable muscle. It feels like a rigid, calcified strip of dense rubber. It feels like a steel cable. When you press into it, you likely feel a dull, radiating ache that travels up the back of your head or behind your eyes. Notice how thick and inflamed that band is. Notice how it feels like it is permanently locked in place. You can drop your hands now. You think that rigid band is just a normal sign of stress. You think it is just a tension headache from staring at a computer screen or reading a book. You think a quick massage or a hot shower is going to fix it. You are entirely, catastrophically wrong. That rock-hard strip of tissue is not just a tense muscle. It is a biological tourniquet. And right now, across 4 distinct layers of gravitational physics, neuroanatomy, autonomic failure, and the structural design of the ancient Roman Empire, I am going to show you exactly how that tight band of muscle is quietly, physically crushing the master nerve of your entire body, and why it is the real reason you are tired, bloated, and anxious. Layer 1 is the physics of the human head. When your head sits perfectly balanced above your spine in a neutral position, it weighs about 5 kilograms. Your cervical spine supports it effortlessly, like a column supporting a sphere. But you do not live in a neutral position. You look down at a phone. You look down at a laptop. You pitch your head forward. When your head drops forward by just 45 degrees, the physics of gravity changes entirely. The weight is now cantilevered in front of your body like a wrecking ball. The torque multiplier turns that 5-kilogram head into 22 kilograms of effective force pulling on your neck. To keep your head from snapping forward and falling off your spine, 4 tiny muscles at the base of your skull, the suboccipitals, must lock into a permanent, maximum force isometric contraction. They hold that 22-kilogram load for hours. Because they never relax, they physically crush their own blood vessels. They are starved of oxygen, a state called ischemia. Toxic metabolic waste floods the tissue. The muscles swell, turn to rigid steel, and form that painful band you just felt. Layer 2 is the anatomical disaster, waiting directly beneath those muscles. If this were just a muscle ache, it wouldn't matter. But directly underneath the suboccipital muscles at the base of the skull is a tiny 12-millimeter hole in the bone called the jugular foramen. Passing directly through that tiny hole is the vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in your autonomic nervous system. It is the master brake pedal for your entire body. It runs from your brainstem down into your heart, your lungs, your stomach, and your immune system. The hole it passes through is made of solid bone. It cannot expand. So when the suboccipital muscles surrounding that hole swell up and lock into rigid steel from hours of looking at a phone, they act like a mechanical clamp. They physically compress the space. They compress the main trunk of the vagus nerve. To understand how wildly unnatural this forward flex posture is, look at the physical architecture of the Roman Empire. The Romans did not build a world that forced them to look down. They built a world that forced the human eye upward. Massive columns, soaring arches, the massive oculus in the roof of the Pantheon. The Roman citizen navigated a world that kept the head balanced perfectly over the cervical spine. In the ancient world, a bowed, forward-flexed head was not just bad posture. It was the physical, universal marker of the conquered slave. It was the posture of the captive. The citizen stood upright. Only the subjugated stared continuously at the ground. Today, we have willingly adopted the posture of the captive for 14 hours a day, and our biology is collapsing because of it. Layer 3 is the failure of your nervous system. 80% of the fibers in the vagus nerve are sensory. Their entire job is to carry data from your organs up to your brain, so your brain knows how to regulate the body. But because the main trunk of the nerve is being physically crushed at the base of your skull, the signal degrades. The brain stops receiving the data. Because the signal is blocked, the vagal brake fails. Your resting heart rate slowly creeps up over the years, and you blame it on getting older. Your digestive system slows down. Your stomach retains food. You feel constantly bloated, and you blame it on a food allergy. Your body gets stuck in a permanent, low-grade state of sympathetic fight-or-flight panic. You try deep breathing. You try meditation. You try humming. But it doesn't matter how much you stimulate the branches of the nerve in your chest if the main trunk is being physically crushed by a muscle clamp at the base of your skull. Layer 4 is your brain. The vagus nerve does not travel through that 12-millimeter hole alone. It shares the passage with the internal jugular vein. Every drop of blood that enters your brain to deliver oxygen must exit your brain through that specific vein. When your swollen, locked suboccipital muscles compress the hole, they do not just crush the nerve. They compress the vein. They physically restrict the drainage of blood out of your skull. Intracranial venous pressure rises. Cerebrospinal fluid, the fluid that washes toxic metabolic waste out of your brain, backs up and becomes sluggish. That thick, heavy, diffuse cognitive fatigue you feel at 3:00 p.m. after staring at a screen all day. The brain fog you think is just mental tiredness. It is not psychological. It is hydraulic. It is toxic waste physically backing up inside your skull because your posture clamped the drain shut. Reach your thumbs back up to the base of your skull. Feel the rigid band. Feel the mechanical clamp. It is not a headache. It is an autonomic tourniquet. You are strangling the master nerve of your body, and you are backing up the plumbing of your brain, simply because you refuse to lift your eyes to the horizon. Stop looking down. Stop adopting the posture of the captive. Bring the screen up to your eyes. Release the suboccipital lock. Reopen the passage. Stand upright and uncrush the nerve. Take a deep breath in through your nose, and as you do, reach both of your arms directly over your head. Reach as high toward the ceiling as your joints will allow. Now do not just stretch, squeeze. Actively contract the muscles in your shoulders, your upper back, your lats, the back of your neck. Tighten them powerfully against the upward reach. Create intense, deliberate physical tension throughout your entire upper torso. Squeeze your fists. Hold that extreme tension. 3, 2, 1. Now exhale heavily, all at once, and let your arms drop completely dead to your sides. Stay exactly where you are. Feel what is happening inside your upper body right now. Feel the immediate, violent rush of heat flushing down your spine. Notice the sudden, heavy looseness in your shoulders, a physical dropping of the trapezius muscles that you didn't even realize were sitting 2 inches too close to your ears. Feel the faint, electric tingling running down the backs of your arms and pooling into your fingertips. Notice how your chest feels distinctly wider, broader, as if the ribs have mechanically unlocked. And pay attention to your next breath. Notice how it just dropped a full inch deeper into your diaphragm without you having to consciously force it down. Hold that posture. Let the nervous system process the physical echo of what you just did. That deep, sudden rush of physical release you just felt was not just a good stretch. It was not a placebo. It was not just blood flow returning to your arms. That was a hard-coded software reset of your central nervous system. It is the exact, fundamental biological sequence that your ancient ancestors ran every single morning of their entire lives, completely instinctively, before they ever took a step, spoke a word, or put a single calorie of food into their mouths. And it is the exact, critical biological sequence that you have entirely, systematically deleted from your morning routine. You just proved that the code is still in there. You just proved that your nervous system remembers how to run the reboot program. But because of the architecture of the modern morning, you have been waking up for years with a nervous system that is physically stuck in the previous day. Here is exactly what is happening inside your neurology. What you just did is not called stretching. Stretching is the act of taking a passive, unengaged muscle and mechanically pulling its ends further apart. What you just did is called pandiculation. Pandiculation is the involuntary neuromuscular reflex that occurs in almost all vertebrate animals. It is the act of taking a muscle, actively and intensely contracting it under conscious tension, and then slowly, deliberately releasing that tension back to a baseline state. There is a profound, night and day neurological difference between stretching a muscle and pandiculating a muscle. When you sleep, your brain heavily reduces its active motor control over your skeletal muscles. As you lie still for 8 hours, your nervous system essentially parks your body. To protect your joints from overextension while you are unconscious, the brain sets a baseline level of stiffness in the connective tissues. If you wake up and immediately try to simply stretch those stiff muscles, if you just passively pull on them, your nervous system fights back. A mechanism called the myotatic stretch reflex detects the sudden pulling, assumes the muscle is tearing, and automatically contracts the muscle to protect it. You pull, the brain pulls back. You gain almost no actual release. Pandiculation completely bypasses the defense mechanism. When you reached up and actively squeezed the muscles of your upper back, you sent a massive, overwhelming biofeedback signal directly to your sensory motor cortex. You told the brain, I am awake. I have taken conscious control of this hardware. You can turn off the autonomous safety stiffness. By contracting the muscle to its maximum and then consciously releasing it, you force the brain to recalibrate the resting length of the muscle fibers. The brain essentially says, oh, we are awake now. We can drop the tension. This is a system reboot. It cures a condition known in clinical somatics as sensory motor amnesia, the state where your brain literally forgets how to fully relax a muscle because it has been holding it tight for so long. Every single wild vertebrate animal on planet Earth does this automatically. Watch a dog wake up from a nap on the rug. It does not open its eyes and instantly break into a full sprint. It stands up. It plants its front paws. It drops its chest to the floor in a downward dog bow. It actively, violently contracts the muscles of its back and shoulders. It holds the tension. It yawns, which is simply pandiculation of the jaw and respiratory diaphragm, and then it releases. Watch a cat wake up. It arches its back, squeezing every muscle along its spine, and then lets it drop. They do not do this because they are doing animal yoga. They do it because the mammalian nervous system physically requires the pandicular reflex to transition from the paralysis of sleep to the readiness of waking life. You used to do this. Bobbies do it in the crib. Toddlers do it when they wake up. But you stopped. And because you stopped, you are carrying the muscular tension of yesterday and the sleep stiffness of last night directly into the middle of today. You are physically conscious, but your musculoskeletal system is neurologically stuck in defense mode. For 200,000 years of anatomically modern human history, the morning was governed by this exact biological sequence. An ancient human did not wake up to an artificial noise in pitch blackness. They woke gradually with the rising of the sun and the shifting temperature of the environment. The very first action upon crossing the threshold into consciousness was the pandicular reflex, the yawn, the deep, full-body contraction and release, the manual reboot of the sensory motor cortex. The second action was walking outside, stepping out of the cave, the shelter, the hut, and into the raw, unmitigated photon energy of the morning sun. The third action was forward locomotion, walking, moving through space, gathering firewood, fetching water, tracking game, checking the perimeter. Notice what is missing from this sequence. Breakfast. The concept of a massive, carbohydrate-heavy morning meal eaten immediately upon waking did not exist. In fact, for the vast majority of human history, eating early in the morning was either a physical impossibility, because the food had to be hunted or gathered first, or a cultural taboo. The Romans literally believed that eating more than one large meal a day was unhealthy, and consuming a heavy meal first thing in the morning was considered a form of gluttony reserved for the sick or the elderly. The biological sequence of the ancient human was sleep, nervous system reset, sunlight, forward movement, labor, and then much later food. This is the exact sequence that your endocrine system, your circadian biology, and your neuroanatomy evolved to expect. It is the sequence that primes the human machine for optimal, high-focus survival. And you have systematically replaced every single step of it with an engineered catastrophe. Here is what modern life did to the human morning. First, we invented the alarm clock. We took a brain that is deep in the delta wave restorative cycles of sleep, and we introduced an auditory shock, a sudden, blaring, high-decibel synthetic noise. This noise triggers an immediate acoustic startle reflex. The brain detects the sudden sound as a mortal threat. The amygdala fires. The adrenal glands dump a massive spike of adrenaline and cortisol into the bloodstream. You do not peacefully wake up. You are violently, chemically startled into sheer panic. Your heart rate skyrockets. Your blood pressure spikes. You are placed instantly into a fight-or-flight sympathetic nervous state before you have even opened your eyes. Second, we introduced the smartphone. Before your feet even touch the floor, before you have taken a single deep breath, you reach for a glowing rectangle. You hold it 6 inches from your face. By doing this, you completely skip the pandicular reset. You skip the yawn. You skip the stretch. Your muscles stay locked in their sleep paralysis stiffness. The sensory motor amnesia sets in permanently for the day. Your shoulders remain hunched. Your neck remains rigid, and you physically carry that trapped, unreleased tension into the bathroom, into the kitchen, and into your car. And as you stare at the screen, your eyes become entirely fixed. You are absorbing the stress of the world, emails, news, social media outrage, while your body is perfectly still and your vision is locked in a narrow, two-dimensional box. You have managed to combine the chemical stress response of being chased by a predator with the physical paralysis of being trapped in a cage. And you do this within the first 90 seconds of your day. Then you sit down. You sit at a table, and you eat a highly processed, carbohydrate-dense breakfast that spikes your insulin and shuts down your orexin production, the exact neuropeptide responsible for making you feel alert, driven, and awake. You skip the reset, you skip the light, you skip the movement, you spike the panic, and then you sedated yourself with food. And you wonder why you need 3 cups of highly concentrated caffeine just to feel like a functioning human being by 9. But the deleted muscular reset is only the first mechanism of your morning exhaustion. Because by staring at a phone instead of the sky, you are sabotaging the most powerful hormonal cascade your body possesses. When an ancient human walked outside into the dawn, the morning sunlight entered their eyes. Inside the human retina, there is a specialized class of cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or iPRGCs. These cells do not see shapes. They do not see colors. They exist for one singular evolutionary purpose: to measure the absolute brightness of the environment, specifically the blue and green wavelengths of natural sunlight, and report that brightness directly to the master clock in the brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. When bright, natural outdoor light hits those cells early in the day, it triggers an essential biological mechanism called the cortisol awakening response, or CAR. Do not confuse this with chronic, toxic stress cortisol. The cortisol awakening response is a healthy, vital, massive pulse of waking hormone. This spike in cortisol is the biochemical signal that completely clears the remaining adenosine from your brain receptors. Adenosine is the molecule of sleepiness. It is the chemical that makes you feel groggy. The morning cortisol spike acts like a biological power wash, scrubbing the sleep molecules out of your neural receptors. At the exact same time, this light-induced cortisol spike sets a 14 to 16-hour timer for your pineal gland to release melatonin later that night. The morning light literally dictates the quality of your evening sleep. When you wake up and look at a smartphone screen, the screen feels bright to your conscious eyes in a dark room. But to the IPRGCs in your retina, the photon density of a phone screen is pathetic. It is maybe 500 lux of light intensity. Natural morning sunlight, even on a cloudy day, is between 10,000 and 50,000 lux. The phone screen is bright enough to stress your nervous system with bad news, but it is astronomically too dim to trigger the cortisol awakening response. Because you stayed indoors, because you looked at a phone instead of the sky, your car is blunted. The cortisol spike never reaches its peak. The adenosine is never fully scrubbed from your receptors. You walk around with residual sleep molecules attached to your brain well into the afternoon. You feel groggy, slow, and lethargic, not because you didn't sleep enough, because you never biologically signaled to your brain that it was time to wake up. And there is a third mechanism, the movement. When the ancient human walked out of the shelter and moved across the landscape to find water or hunt, they engaged in forward locomotion. When you walk forward, the visual world moves past you. Trees, rocks, the horizon, they stream past the periphery of your eyes. In neurobiology, this is called optic flow. In the last decade, advanced neuroscience has discovered exactly what optic flow does to the human brain. The lateral eye movements, generated by moving forward through a landscape directly and mechanically, suppress the amygdala. The amygdala is the threat detection center of your brain. It is the panic button. When you walk forward and generate optic flow, the brain receives a hardwired neurological signal that says, "We are moving. We are not trapped. We are navigating the environment successfully." This signal dramatically reduces anxiety, lowers the resting heart rate, and turns off the sympathetic fight-or-flight response. It is a mechanical off switch for stress. This is the exact underlying neurological mechanism utilized in EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy to treat severe PTSD. The lateral eye movement suppresses the fear center. Ancient humans got this amygdala suppression automatically, every single morning, simply by walking forward to start their day. They mechanically cleared their anxiety before they ever engaged in complex problem solving. You sit in a chair. You drink coffee in your kitchen. You sit in your car. You sit at your desk. Your visual field is entirely static. There is zero optic flow. The amygdala is never suppressed. Worse, your visual field is locked onto a narrow screen, which triggers foveal vision, the narrowed, hyperfocused visual state the brain uses when hunting prey or fighting an enemy. Foveal vision actively increases sympathetic arousal. You traded optic flow, the ultimate anxiety reducer, for foveal screen starring, the ultimate anxiety amplifier. Now stand completely still and recognize the sheer magnitude of the biological machinery you have been suppressing. Think about the heat and the looseness you felt in your shoulders when you reached up and dropped your arms. Think about the depth of the breath that effortlessly followed. That was just one mechanism. Imagine all three running in sequence. Three profound, neurobiological mechanisms running simultaneously, cascading perfectly into one another, creating an unstoppable physiological momentum. 1. Penductlusion, the intense contraction and release of the musculature, resetting the sensory-motor cortex, erasing the physical stiffness of the night, rebooting the nervous system from paralyzed to primed. 2. The cortisol awakening response, triggered by the massive photon density of natural morning light hitting the retinal ganglion cells, scrubbing the brain of residual adenosine, erasing the chemical grogginess, starting the 16-hour countdown for perfect, deep sleep that night. 3. Optic flow, generated by forward locomotion. Visual information streaming past the eyes, signaling safety to the brain stem and actively, mechanically suppressing the amygdala's fear response, erasing baseline anxiety before the day's stress can even begin. All three of these immense systems ran automatically for your ancestors. They ran before a single word of a morning meeting was spoken. They ran before the first calorie of food was consumed. They were the prerequisite for human function. You deleted all three. You replaced the Penduktsluschen with the paralyzed, hunched scroll of the smartphone. You replaced the photon density of the sun with the pathetic, artificial glare of a glowing rectangle. You replaced the anxiety-killing optic flow of forward movement with the anxiety-spiking foveal vision of sitting entirely static in a chair. You broke the sequence, you starved the receptors, you locked the muscles. And then you tried to fix the devastating chemical and physical fallout with a synthetic alarm clock, a highly processed breakfast, and massive doses of liquid caffeine. You did not lose your morning energy because you got older. You did not become a non-morning person because of your genetics. You simply stopped running the startup sequence the machine requires to turn on. Now, the evidence calibration. Because these mechanisms span multiple disciplines of biology, and I want you to know exactly how firmly established each one is in the scientific literature. The Penduktsuk response and the concept of sensory-motor amnesia is established, bedrock clinical somatics, pioneered by researchers like Thomas Hanna. The difference between the Matutuk stretch reflex and the cortical reset of Penduktsluschen is highly documented neurology. It is measurable on an EMG. It is physiological fact. The cortisol awakening response and the function of intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, APAJ-ASUZ, is Nobel Prize-winning circadian biology. The exact mechanisms by which lux intensity and blue light wavelengths regulate the supracosmetic nucleus and clear adenosine are arguably the most heavily researched topics in modern sleep science. Not debated, absolute biological fact. The effect of optic flow on the amygdala and the suppression of the sympathetic nervous system is heavily documented in modern neuroscience, brought into mainstream awareness by researchers like Dr. Indra Huberman. The lateral eye movements mechanically quieting the fear center is the proven underlying mechanism of EMDR therapy, which is the gold standard for trauma treatment. Strong, replicated neurological science. The historical claim that ancient humans did not eat a massive breakfast immediately upon waking is a robust anthropological and archaeological consensus. The very word breakfast means to break the fast, an event that historically happened much later in the day after the initial labor was completed. The structured, early morning, carbohydrate-heavy meal is an invention of the post-industrial revolution era, designed to pack workers with cheap calories before they entered a factory for a 12-hour shift. The history is consensus, the neuroscience is proven, the circadian biology is Nobel laureate-level fact. The physics of your body are not broken. They have simply been waiting for you to press the correct sequence of buttons. Do it again right now. Take a deep breath, reach your arms to the ceiling, reach higher. Squeeze the upper back, squeeze the lats, contract the shoulders against the air. Build the tension until your arms shake slightly. 3, 2, 1. Exhale, drop them dead. Feel the rush, feel the heat, feel the shoulders unlock. Feel the nervous system recognize the signal and drop its defenses. That feeling is your biology begging you to return to the baseline. Tomorrow morning when the synthetic alarm goes off, do not touch the phone. Do not look at the glowing rectangle. Leave it face down. Stand up immediately, Run the sequence. Penduktslut. Contract and release the muscles of your back, your arms, your legs. Reset the sensory motor cortex. Erase the sleep. Step outside. Do not look through a window, glass filters the light. Step out into the raw photons. Let the light hit the retina. Trigger the cortisol awakening response. Scrub the adenosine. And walk forward, just for 5 minutes. Let the visual world stream past you. Generate the optic flow. Suppress the amygdala. Kill the baseline anxiety before the world has a chance to hand you more. Penduktslut light, optic flow. 3 mechanisms, 10 minutes, every single morning. The fatigue was never your fault. The grogginess was a product of the cage, the screen, and the alarm. The sentence was a life lived in a state of permanent, low-level exhaustion. The pardon is the sequence, the exact sequence your ancestors ran every day of their lives. Run the program. The nervous system will do the rest.